Hello, good evening, and thank you very much for joining in. We're still waiting for more people to join in, but in the meanwhile, just because it is time, I thought we'll have a bit of an introduction, and I'll also explain to you how you use this platform and where do you post questions. Well, my name is Haroon Ahmed Jan. I am the regional head of member affairs for the Middle East and South Asia region of ACCA. We also have with us Ruchira, my colleague from Sri Lanka, who's going to assist me and who's joined in. And both of us, we're going to run this session on practical experience requirement and your entire journey as a student or as a member, as a student or an affiliate to go on to become a member. So first things first, let me first of all explain to you what you see on your screens. So for those who have not used this platform by the name go to webinar before, um, uh, just remember one thing. You'll have an orange arrow pointing outwards or inwards. This gives you access to a special menu, a floating menu on which there are some options available. So those options are you'll have a questions dialog box, you will have access to a chat dialog box, there'll be some handouts if need be. So some handouts may also be available, but we haven't uploaded any at the moment. You can, if you want to ask a question, Aaron, and I would want you to ask as many questions as you would want. So keep typing in your questions in the questions dialog box. Okay. You will not be able to see each other's questions there, but if you continue to type them in, we will have an access to all the questions that are there, and we'll continue to answer them. If you want to verbally put your questions also, we will give, considering provided we have enough time, we will give an opportunity to a few individuals, and particularly few because otherwise it will become we will exceed the 1 hour window that we've set for this session. So we'll give about 5 minutes for two or three verbal questions also, and we will ask you to raise hands and then unmute you if you'd like to ask a question verbally. I will encourage you to ask questions which are general, which are not specific to you, so that everybody in the call can relate to these questions and benefit from them. If we have too many individual questions, remember there are going to be about 100 individuals in the call or more than 100. We have about 550 registrations. If there are too many individual questions, then it will become difficult to answer all of them. So therefore, if you have any individual question, you can still type it in. You can contact us later on with your specific question, and we will try to answer it there, afterwards through email and other means. So let's make a beginning. Since we are short of time, I'll have to rush through some of these slides. Um, I have a huge slide deck, in fact, so we really have less than a minute per slide to run through. So let's begin very quickly. Um, Straight away, we're going to talk about practical experience requirement. First of all, why are we talking about practical experience requirement? And that's because all of you, some years back, you took a decision that you're going to become a professional accountant. And then you took a decision that ACCA is the best qualification for you, right? That, that decision that you took some years ago, it is only, I would rather call it a dream. That dream only comes true when you complete the qualification and when you become a member. Without having completed the qualification, you end up putting a lot of effort in, but you do not get the results, the benefits out of the effort that you've put in. So so therefore, if I have to say that the that the fun of having a pie is in eating it, right? And that only happens once you become a member and when you start to enjoy the benefits that we are referring to. So Practical experience requirement, PER as we normally call it, is an essential element of the ACCA qualification. I am going to talk about the other essential elements as well, but very quickly, this is the layout of today's session. So we'll talk about some benefits of ACCA membership. We will then jump on to the practical experience requirement. In the end, we'll talk very quickly about the ethics and professional skills module. How very important is this particular module of your qualification? Then in the end, we'll talk about what resources are available to plan your practical experience requirements, and then we'll go for some question and answers. We may slightly run over time, so I hope all of you are okay with that, about 10 to 15 minutes at the most. Moving on. Now, as the first benefit of the qualification, there are almost 227,000 individuals around the world who started this qualification and completed it. Right? When I say completed, they went on to become a member. Right? And at the same time, they completed the qualification and then they continued to maintain the relationship with ACCA. Remember, this is a lifelong relationship. This relationship will continue to be in place till the time you decide to retire from your work. So therefore, this lifelong relationship should be such that we continue to benefit. ACCA continues to benefit you in whatever role you are in whatever you're trying to achieve, in making sure that you continue to grow and develop in your professional career. And that is the only way by which is this relationship can turn into a lifelong relationship. And at ACCA, I can assure you that ACCA puts in a lot of effort to make sure that we continue to add value to your professional careers, to your professional lives, to your growth and your professional development. So with that in mind, the foremost point is that ACCA is a community of 227,000 members around the world. When you become a member, you join this community and you join this large network of highly accomplished ACCA members from all over the world, and you develop your linkages there. 86% is a relevant fact that we mentioned there. 86% of employers think that ACCA members are complete finance professionals. So no matter what role in finance do you assign to an ACCA member, these employers feel that that ACCA members are a good fit for those roles and good fit for their organizations. Um, so these are some of the other benefits of continuing to of number one, becoming a member and then continuing to remain a member. So first of all, ACCA's research and insight. ACCA has a huge repository of researches that we continue to perform, and we want our members and our students and our affiliates to benefit from these. These researches are available free of cost on ACCA's website, and from time to time, we also conduct sessions based on these researches for benefit of our members. So that's one benefit. Get connected and stay ahead. Of course, as you're connected, you continue to remain in contact. You continue to reap benefits of this of being a part of this network. Enhance your knowledge and skills, and that we ensure that you continue to develop your knowledge and skills by continuous learning or continuous professional development, as we call it, which is a mandatory requirement for all the ACCA members around the world. They have to continue to invest about 40 hours of learning every year in their lives, and through that we ensure that our members have up-to-date knowledge of their respective domains, of their respective professional careers. And finally, become an ACCA fellow, which is another prestigious title. So when you complete 5 consecutive continuous years of membership, you are then given the title of a fellow member, which indicates that you have completed your 5 years post qualification experience and that you are senior in your role now. So some of the benefits. Now let's go through an overview of what practical experience requirement is. Now remember, I said to you that you started off with the dream of becoming an ACCA member. There are 3 E's, as we call them, which are essential for completing your ACCA journey and becoming a member. The first and foremost, if there are any students in there, completing the 13 exams that there are. So if you've passed those exams, you go on to become an ACCA affiliate, right? But at the same time, you have to complete an ethics module, which we're going to talk about later very briefly. And then last but not the least, you have to complete your practical experience, your experience requirement. Now, with these 3 essential elements of the qualification completed, you can then go on to call yourself an ACCA member. Then that is if you have submitted successfully your practical experience requirement documents, you have completed your ethics module, and you have passed all the 13 exams. So 3 essential elements. If one of them is missing, you don't go on to be called an ACCA member. Please remember that. Now, talking specifically about the experience, and I'll very quickly rush through it. 36 months plus achievement of performance objectives. Okay, so 9 performance objectives to be achieved in a matter of 36 months. But these 36 months is a minimum, is the minimum time that one would spend in completing. And remember, by the way, that you don't need to complete the 36 months in one go. It can be that you start working before starting your ACCA qualification, then alongside your job or your internship or whatever you're doing, you start taking your exams. There can be different models that you can really adopt to continue to progress with the qualification. But it is not a requirement that you start your 36 months of experience only when you've passed your exams. You should ideally start working alongside your exams, and that is what, at least particularly about your professional skills papers, and that's what the examiners also recommend as a minimum, right? um, so 36 months can begin even alongside your exams or prior to your exams or after the exams. However, there is no stringent requirement that you have to spend these 36 months as a block or as consecutive 36 months for your performance objectives or your practical experience requirement. um, Now, the second statement, which is very important, is that these 36 months are to be spent in a relevant accounting or finance role. Remember, relevance is extremely important, and we'll find out what relevant roles exist. So let's jump on straight onto that. So on the left of this screen, or this list available, there are some relevant roles given. So they have to be accounting, audit, financial reporting, insolvency, management accounting, taxation, and other fields which are relevant to the accounting and finance profession. Remember that, right? uh, these roles that are listed on the left, you can work towards these either as a part-time individual. You can, these can, there can be multiple roles that you don't have to select one and only focus on that one. You can do multiple disciplines. You can earn these 36 months of practical experience through internships, through volunteering, and also through partially relevant roles, which we are going to discuss in a few slides, and roles before joining ACC as well. So if you've been working somewhere even prior to, like I said, prior to doing your ACCA qualification, that time period that you've already spent in any of these roles prior to joining the qualification will not go waste. You can still claim that as your practical experience requirement, provided it was supervised by a qualified accountant. Okay, so that's very important. And in our presentation, we're going to talk about, why is it important for you to have a qualified accountant supervising your work when you're working towards your practical experience requirement. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at the questions at the moment, so I'll quickly run through a few slides and then take a break, look at the questions, and then come back. Okay, if that's okay. I can see the hand raises and I can see some questions coming in as well. Now, let's very quickly move on to the PER dashboard. So how do you know how many months of experience you've gained? How do you know how many objectives you have already completed, performance objectives that is? How many have you already completed? How many remaining? What is your progress? So all this comes through a PER dashboard that is available to you through your My ACCA account. Okay, so if you log into your My ACCA account, there is a PER dashboard available, which exactly looks like what you see on the screen. It gives you an overview of how much progress have you made, how many months have you completed, right? Um, how much time have you recorded also, and then third, the performance objectives that you're currently working on or the ones that you have already completed. Okay, so let's go on. First, first and foremost, and this is when you start working. Please remember that as you start progressing towards your practical experience requirement, um, or even if you have already done some work in the past and you want to record it, yes, it can be recorded as well. But this is the beginning. This is the starting point, right? So you start from this particular section where you define your details of your employer. Who was your employer, right? What was your job title in that organization? When did you start working, or when are you going to start working? The end date is optional in this case. So if you have just started with this position, with this training opportunity, right? Of course, there's not going to be an end date. But if you've already completed your work and it was in the past before starting the exam, you can mention an end date, and it will automatically compute the number of months you would have completed accordingly. Um, Now, in your particular role, this is a very, very important step, and that has been highlighted through this red box as well. So, um, in your role, how many hours do you spend working in a week, right? So normally, it varies. If you're doing a part-time role, it'll be fewer hours per week. If you're doing it in a full-time role, it'll be 42, 44, 48 hours in a week, depending on how many days in the week do you work. But then the next point is how much work that you were doing in this role was can be considered relevant work, right? So remember the previous slide where we had some relevant roles listed out. If all the time that you spend doing this work or doing this job or this internship is spent on relevant role in a relevant role, accounting and finance related work, taxation related work, etc., then of course you can claim 100% relevant role. But if it is, let's suppose, partially relevant, if it is doing a bit of sales and doing a bit of accounting or recording, and then if you're managing multiple roles, then automatically the percentage here will reduce. So it's very important for you to understand that in such a case, if you have spent, let's say, 1 month so far, let's say 30 days or 1 month in a partially relevant role, let's say the role was 50% relevant, then you will only be able to record 15 15 days of PER recorded. Now let me explain it another way. Let's suppose it is you've worked for 4 months. Okay, let's simplify it. Let's suppose you've worked for 4 months, and over here you had mentioned that your work is 50% relevant, so you will only be able to claim 2 months towards the PER and not all the 4 months. However, if this is 100% relevant, you will be able to claim all the 4 months towards your PER duration of 36 months. I hope that was made clear. If you have doubts, please type in as a question. Now, the next question you see in there is an ACCA approved employer. Were you working for an ACCA approved employer? We'll touch upon that later on. And then there are questions like, was that in a relevant role? Were you doing lecturing? And please remember that lecturing cannot satisfy the 36 months requirement. It can only, as a maximum, satisfy 1 year of practical experience requirement, but it cannot be spread over 36 months. I hope you remember that. If you are in a lecturing role, then you have to, alongside that, or having done lecturing for a year, you'll have to step out of that role and continue a relevant role, accounting and finance related role, for the remaining 24 months or whatever the case may be. So please remember that. Moving on, we spent a lot of time on this particular slide, but it was important. Now, this is once again emphasizing or entering details about your current role, right, and an employer. There can be multiple employers added. There can be multiple durations of these employers. What was your job title at each organization? Of course, that can be different. And at the same time, you have to add supervisors, practical experience supervisors, to this section as well. So remember, the first point was you define the name of your employer, what is your role in this organization, when did you start, the date, time, etc. I mean the date, etc. Then the number of hours per week, relevant role or not. And then once you've done all those, then you go on to define who is going to be your practical experience supervisor in this organization. Now, it can be so that there can be multiple individuals, because you may be rotating between different roles. There can be multiple individuals looking after your progress towards the PER, and they are the practical experience supervisors. We're going to talk about that in a bit of detail going on, but remember, you have to add the details of the practical experience supervisor over here. Okay, so as you go on completing your practical experience, let's suppose your time in a specific role has now ended. Even though you may be continuing with the same organization, you can put an end date to the role. And let's say if you now switched on to another role, let's say previously you were into financial reporting, now you're being sent into internal audit, right? So your time in one role has completed, put an end date there, record your practical experience, claim the time, sign off, move on, define a new role in the same organization, right? A new job title, and then continue recording that as well. I hope that is very, very simple. It's not very difficult to understand. Okay, now, like I said to you, as you put an end date in your practical experience requirement, the previous slide that I was showing to you, as you put an end date, the system automatically calculates that this is the time that you have already spent. Now you can go on, and now at this stage, to claim that time. Okay, so remember, claiming the time is one particular activity. uh, Performance objectives, getting the performance objectives signed off, is another activity. Now there can be one practical experience supervisor looking at both these things, or if, let's suppose, your practical experience supervisor is not a qualified accountant, there can be an individual or a line manager looking at your time claim particularly, and that individual can be somebody who's not a qualified accountant. But then when it comes to your performance objectives, remember, there has to be a qualified accountant who has to sign these off. Ideally, look for an organization, look for a role where there is where there is a professionally qualified accountant as your practical experience supervisor, right? So that this individual can sign off both your time and your performance objectives. But if you are, for some reason, in a situation where this one individual who's your line manager is not a qualified accountant, then that line manager can go on, verify the time, so verify the time claim, but then another individual in the same organization can act as your supervisor to sign off your performance objectives. So that's how it is to be managed. Okay, so some slides to show you how you can claim the time. So if you've put an end date there, it automatically takes you, you have this option available to claim this time, right? It is showing you how many months you've already completed. So you click this button, it'll take you to claiming the time, and you can complete this recording, recording this section. What you have to do here is that you have to define who was your practical experience supervisor during this time, an individual that you've already declared when you were defining the employer, your role, the practical experience supervisors. This is where you have to then you have to link up the time that you've spent, so it can be verified that this was the particular individual who was supervising your work at that particular time. And then you may add some comments here while submitting your time claim to your practical experience supervisor. Okay. Now, moving very quickly on to performance objectives. Okay. Now, remember, and every individual, every ACCA student or affiliate has to complete 9 performance objectives in all, out of which 5 performance objectives are essential performance objectives. So the list goes: ethics and professionalism, number 1. Number 2, stakeholder relationship management. Number 3, very important, strategy and innovation. Number 4 is governance, risk, and control. And last but not the least, leadership and management. So these are the 5 essential performance objectives that every individual has to complete. However, there are some technical performance objectives as well, and these are 17 in number. They have been assigned to 6 different categories. Okay, so out of these 17 performance objectives, you have to complete a minimum of 4. So 5 essentials, 4 technical, that makes it 9. Now, having had a look at these performance objectives, you can select 3 performance objectives from one category and 1 performance objective from another category, and that's a minimum. But you can spread these 4 performance objectives across the 6 categories also. So for example, you can pick up, all right, I'll do corporate reporting and business reporting, performance objective number 6, and then I'll go on doing performance objective number 9, and then number 14, and then I'll do number 15. Okay, so you can actually spread the 4 performance objectives across different domains. However, ideally, I would say that there has to be a lot of thought behind, which performance objectives are you going to seriously pursue, and that thought has to be, what do you want to become eventually as an ACCA member? What role do you want to seek employment in? And it will be best to focus on that particular role and focus on the requirements of that particular role, and then choose the performance objectives according to that. Just spreading yourself too thin, being into trying to be jack of all trades, may not be very helpful at this stage. However, it is entirely left to your choice. I would say ideally you should look at a minimum of 2. I mean, 2 is a minimum, 2 to 3 roles, but do not spread yourself too thin across different performance objectives. Okay, now each performance objective has multiple multiple elements in it. So when you go on to check each performance objective, you will have a description of the objective available. Then there will be elements, and every performance objective will have 9 elements available. Sorry, 5 elements available. And once you have completed those 5 elements, you can then go on and record a statement of completion of this objective, which is going to be 200, 500 words, and we're going to talk about that as well. Now, before I go on any further, I will make a comment here. I'll stop, take some questions, and then we'll start again. And that's because we have spent about half an hour talking. I will now look at some questions. Remember, ACCA employees come across members in various roles. Some of them are very, very successful. some of them not as successful, even though they have all passed exactly the same exams, they have the same performance objectives available, right? And I mean, the only difference comes in when you see the seriousness of effort going into completing your practical experience requirement, right? So if you really uh, plan your performance objectives, right? Think through your career, and then I mean, set your goals, and then come back and set your performance objectives. If you are all along in close consultation with your practical experience supervisor, those are the individuals who gain the maximum benefit of becoming an ACCA member, right? So that is how important this part of the qualification is. So let's look at the questions people have asked. Okay. Okay, let me very quickly go to some of the questions here. Okay. Muhammad Wusatullah Khan has asked, would like to know how to write the PER objectives. Do I need to write 9 objectives as main headings, or can I write any objectives within the main heading? Okay. Um, so if I've understood the question properly, I mean, if you're asking about how to um, select those performance objectives, I've told you there are two categories: 5 essentials for technical, right? So essentials, you have to pick up all. Options, you have to pick up 4, right? When you start working towards them, you need to know beforehand if you have if I mean, the 5 elements of each performance objective, you need to know those, and then you should work, I mean, you should work towards those elements as you go along. When you have completed working towards an element, I'll show it to you in the slides to come, that you have to go on and claim completion of each of the elements. Okay, so if I have to say 5 elements per performance objective and 9 performance objectives and all, that means you will be working towards 45 elements throughout your practical experience, throughout the 36 months that you're going to complete. My second question, how I can link my PER to the supervisor for sign off. So remember when I said to you that you have to, you have to assign, I mean, you can have multiple supervisors available. As you go along, you have to select, so for which particular role, who was the supervisor. Okay, in one particular organization as an employer, there can be multiple roles and there can be multiple supervisors. So as you go along defining the employer, then defining your role, and then go on to define your supervisor in that role. Change of role in your organization, go on, create a new role, define a new practical experience supervisor. Okay, so that is how you automatically continue to link up your practical experience supervisor with your role that you are undertaking. um, Sneha is asking, I wanted to know what percentage of percentage is relevant in the PER if I am tax intern. Okay, if you're a tax intern and all your time is spent on taxation, right? There is nothing else that you do, right? Then that is 100% relevant straight away, because tax is directly a relevant skill that you're working towards. Tasneem Fakhri is asking, does our role not count if you're not working under a qualified accountant? Also, why does my internship of 8 months under a qualified accountant not show in my PER, even though approved by the employer? Tasneem, I'm not sure what particular mistake you made in making, but to answer the first part of your question, um, now this is a very pertinent situation. If you are not working under direct supervision of a qualified accountant, then you have to look around in the same organization. Is there a qualified accountant in the organization who can sign off your performance objectives? Remember, performance objectives are must mandatorily be signed by a qualified accountant. However, the time claim, and the time claim is I have spent 17 months in this organization. That's a time claim. I have spent 10 months in this particular role in this particular organization. That's a time claim. Time claim can be signed off by a non-professionally qualified accountant as well as a line manager, so for example. Okay, so that is what the explanation is. Now, if there is no, I'm talking about options now. So if there is no particular qualified accountant directly supervising, is there one indirectly who can supervise? If not in the same organization, is there a qualified accountant available outside of this organization? Right, so for example, if you're working in an organization and there are auditors who are doing an external audit of your organization, if there is a qualified accountant there, even that individual can sign off. Okay, but if this is an organization where there is no professional accountant employed in this organization, there is no professional accountant available even outside the organization, as a supplier, as a client, as a contractor, as a consultant, then there's a bit of difficulty, then there's some trouble. And for such cases, let me very briefly tell you, for such cases, ACCA has now allowed, through the mentorship portal, there's a global mentorship portal, by permission, there is permission for a remote mentor or practical experience supervisor also available. But you have to apply for it, you have to explain your circumstances. Once approved, there can be a practical experience supervisor, remote practical experience supervisor assigned to you. We'll have to hurry up because we are running out of time. Aaron Roy is asking, what if an individual is engaged in 100% finance role, however, the supervisor is not a qualified accountant? How could be a CFA, FRM, etc.? How do we do that? I've just explained, Aaron. If there is further explanation required, do contact us. Isuru is asking, we can have our PER signed off by an employer prior to completing all the exams if we meet the practical experience requirements? Of course, yes, that's what I explained. So if you've completed your work before taking your exams, yes, you may get your practical experience requirements signed off by a qualified accountant, even if it is done prior to the exams. Is audit trainee considered relevant role? 110% considered relevant role, yes. Next question is, sir, I have been working in an audit firm. How should I claim the PER? Simple. I mean, not very difficult. If you're in a relevant role, I've just started explaining the process to you. How can we get assigned to a supervisor? All right, I've explained that as well in a bit of detail. But Pragala Ravi, if there is some ambiguity in understanding, do let us know. We'll try to explain it further. Let's go on, take a couple more questions, and then we'll revert to the presentation. Tanushikra is asking, can you please explain whether we could update two roles at the same time, one with full-time role and another with a part-time role, lecturing? How does the time period accumulate? So yes, that is possible, although it's a specific case. We can discuss this offline. You can send us an email and I'll explain it to you. But yes, that is possible. If you are doing, let's suppose, lecturing as a full-time individual and doing some part-time work as well in the evenings, yes, you can record those as part-time, but then the percentage time recorded will automatically change. So that we'll have to explain to you. Okay, do we have to submit the service letter to prove the experience? Yes, experience requirement to be proven. It is important that you gain an experience certificate or a letter from the organization that you've worked in. However, the time claim signed off by the practical experience supervisor serves that purpose as well. Okay. There's a question from Senali. How does the performance objective recording differ for those working for ACCA approved employers. So now we're going to talk about that. There are some slides on this particular subject. Does the qualified accountant need to be an ACCA or CIMA, ACA, etc.? Yes, a qualified accountant should ideally be a member of a body which is a member of IFAC. Okay, so that's what explains a professional accountant. When working part-time, is it also calculated as half claiming time? Exactly. So in a part-time role, you cannot claim the full PER hours or full PER duration, right? It constitutes about 50% of what you are completing as PER duration. Okay, if it is full-time and in a relevant role, only then it is 100%. If it is part-time in a relevant role, then it will be 50% or less or more, but not 100%. Or if it is full-time in a non-relevant role, then again it will be not 100%, it will be less than that. And we leave it to your judgment to decide what percentage is it, okay? And your practical experience supervisor to sign that off. So that's how it is done. Ramesh is saying to take the BSc, do I have to finish third step also? BSc we haven't discussed yet because it's not related. But today's topic is PER and we'll focus on that. What if we start ACCA after we have covered 3 years in Big Four firm? Can we utilize the time? Exactly, I've just explained that this is possible. Tilini, this is possible. Sneha is asking, is it relevant if it was personal tax and not corporate tax? Yes, it can be relevant. However, I would say that if it is taxation, I mean, you should really be thinking beyond just personal tax, right? Personal tax is very, very limited, I can understand. But then if it is corporate or if it is other domain of tax, is tax planning, etc., etc., that's all part of the. I mean, remember, each and every performance objective has 5 elements. You need to go and have a look at those elements. So if it is about taxation, pick up the performance objective for taxation, go and have a look at um, the 5 elements available. So if there are 3 performance objectives on taxation, there will be 5 elements each, and those elements will explain to you that in order to complete this performance objective, you need to go on and complete those 5 elements as well. So that will give you a complete detail. Yes, personal tax can be considered relevant, but is it all? I would say no, it's not all. You'll have to go on and work further if you're talking about taxation. Is treasury experience relevant? Yes, 100% it is. Will I not receive my ACCA qualification if I don't complete my PER? Not at all, Aditya. PER is an essential element. If you will not complete it, no, you will not receive the qualification. How much time claim will be relevant towards a collections agent at a bank as a past experience? Moreover, there's no qualified accountant from this experience. How can I get it signed off? So Kena, I've just explained it, that if it is not a relevant role, it is for you to decide how much relevant was it, okay, and for your practical experience supervisor to sign off. So really, it's a difficult situation if the experience was gained in the past at a time when there was no practical experience supervisor there. These things, I would say, should really be planned in advance, not when they have happened, right? So if it is in advance, like I explained to you, you could have been assigned a remote supervisor who could have looked at your work as you were performing it, okay, and then could have signed it off. Not in the past, okay. So we'll stop there and we'll take up some questions afterwards, but let's revert to the performance objectives. Remember, I explained to you that every performance objective will have a description, will have 5 elements, which defines what roles or what jobs do you need to perform in order to complete this performance objective, and 200 to 500 word statement that you will have to write explaining, what did you do. So let's just have a look at these statements, and it is very important that these 9 statements that you have to write, one for each objective, these to be very structured, right? So when you're writing a statement, 200 to 500 words, you have to provide examples of the tasks that you were performing, because of which you feel that you have completed the objective, or your supervisor feels that you've completed that objective. You have to very specifically describe what skills have you gained, and take help from the elements, the 5 elements there. All of those should be ticked off in order to describe that you've gained all those skills. And most importantly, you have to reflect on what you've learned. Now remember, um, it cannot be I mean, everybody's experience is going to be different, right? When you're recording it, you have to tell about your experience, which is going to be unique. Okay. And therefore, when I must tell you that when ACCA checks these performance objectives, right, I mean, checks the statements, all the plagiarism tools that there are available for researchers, they are available to ACCA as well. And ACCA does pick up on a cut and paste job as well. So please write down your own experiences. Remember, this is something very, very important. This can define your career. So be very, very specific about it. Use, top tips include, use at least one example for each objective. Do not, when you're writing down the statement, do not ignore examples. Examples are very important. Do not repeat information across different performance objectives. If you already mentioned it once in a statement, while writing down a statement for a performance objective, do not repeat it, for other of performance objectives as well. They're all unique. They're all categorically written there, and that's why the experience gain or the skills gain would be different as well. Now, um, there's a typical example that has been provided, and that is that when you're writing down the statement, you have to tell us what you did, not what the organization used, how the organization used to function, how the department used to function. That is not the objective. The objective is that when you went there, when you joined in a specific role in that organization, what did you do, right? What skills did you learn, right? Not what was happening in that organization. Okay. I mean, write it in a way that it reflects your learning. Let's go on. Performance objectives. So if you're into the performance objectives section, you can see on the screen that on the top, it explains to you, how much time have you completed so far. I mean, so for example, in this case, it says in this particular individual has worked as a trainee accountant at Accountancy Limited for 17 months. And the performance objectives completed so far, there are 3 performance objectives completed. um, the particular individual has completed objective number 1, objective number 3. There were 5 required, which means 3 more to go. And if you're talking about the technical objectives also, right, this person has, if you look at performance objective number 6, it says 1 element to go, which means this person for this particular objective has completed or claimed 4 elements. There is 1 element which is still left behind. Okay. Performance objective number 9 has just been started. There are no elements completed so far. Performance objective number 11 has been completed. And last of all, according to this, plan and control performance, again, a performance objective has been started. So this is how you read this information. It could be different in your case. It could be, but this is how you can read this information from your dashboard that is available to you. Okay. All right. So if you go further into the performance objectives, okay, so in this particular case, we are looking at performance objective number 13. So you can see the left column is exactly what you were seeing in the previous screen, but performance objective number 13 has now been opened up. You can see the description. Remember, there were 3 things that I told you For each performance objective, you will see a description. So here goes that description at the top. Then there are going to be 5 elements. So here are those 5 elements that I mentioned. And then each performance objective has to have your 200 to 500 word statement, okay, which goes on here. Okay, so once you've written it, you can save your statement. You continue to write it as well. Now, we will see that there's other important information in there as well. So which exams are linked to this particular performance objective, which is plan and control performance. Okay, so this is very important information. So if you've taken your exams already, you can go back and check which particular exams does this particular objective relate to, and you can then link up the work. Right, so this is it. Completing objectives. We just explained to you. This is, once you have claimed each and every element in this particular objective, and you have written down your 200 to 500 word statement, then you can go on to click the button on the top right corner of the objective, which is claim objective. Okay, so which means when you click the claim objective button, automatically the supervisor will receive an email with the complete details of this particular objective, of the statement, can access all the elements that you have claimed also, so all that will be made available, and that supervisor will then get an option to sign it off, or otherwise ask you for consultation, and may ask you to go back and work further on any of these elements if the person, if your practical experience supervisor so desires. Okay. So I think we can skip a couple of slides. This has already been shared with you. I mean, the next few slides take you step by step through, how to start an objective. I think it's self-explanatory. You just click the start objective button. The elements are there. You go on to claim those elements that you've completed. And once you've claimed all the elements, then you can go on and write down the statement. And then once you've written down the statement and you've saved it, then you can go on and claim the particular objective. It is a simple process, as simple as that. Okay. Once you have claimed this objective, they'll continue to be added to your basket, which shows on the top right corner of the screen. Okay, so they're going to continue to sit there till the time they are approved, and then they start showing as completed performance objectives on your dashboard. Okay. Now, okay, so if you go on and select the basket, the cart, as we normally know this term. I mean, know this. For example, at the moment, if you click the cart, it shows items selected for submission. This is performance objective number 13. The 5 elements listed there. You can remove a particular element if you feel like going back. You can pick the particular practical experience supervisor. So please remember, when you were asking how can we link up performance objectives to a particular supervisor, there can be multiple supervisors available, but this is how you select the supervisor and select the employer, and then put down some comments and then submit it. Okay, this is how you link up a performance objective with a practical experience supervisor at a particular employer. So that is how it is done. Okay, back to questions once again. A few questions and then we'll jump back to the last part of this presentation. All right, this question, Ruchira, by the way, you have control of the mic. You can unmute yourself and ask questions. So do employers have to sign objectives? No. Can they refuse? Yes. Can they also refuse to sign the time? Yes, if if the employer thinks that the time has not been completed yet, if the employer thinks that it was not a relevant role and therefore the time is not considered complete, If the employer thinks that it was not 50%, it was not 100% relevant, it was 75 or 60 or 50% relevant, of course, yes. So these are all situations in which an employer can turn around and say that no, I will not approve of the performance objective, and you need to go back and complete certain elements of the objective or spend more time.
Haroon, sorry, just to that area. If a particular employer, maybe that particular employee or has completed that time in their workplace, however, for whatever the reason, the employer does not want to sign because of maybe some disciplinary action or some they did not stick to certain policies in the company or whatever the reason, can they, number one is, can they still not sign the time, or can they can only refuse objectives but have to sign time? Is that the case?
I think this is a very subjective situation. Ideally, we would not want trainees to be in a situation where the employer has a disciplinary claim on that individual. In that case, ACCA will not go on and press the employer that no, whatever the case may be, even if the person was there was an ethical challenge, you must still go on and sign. I mean, in this particular case, just like an examiner can check your paper and consider you or declare you pass or fail, right? ACCA cannot go back and challenge the examiner that no, your marking was wrong. This person actually failed, whereas you declared him pass, or the person actually passed and you declare. ACCA will not do that. ACCA will totally rely and trust the examiner. Similarly, an employer or a supervisor in this organization has complete control over signing off your practical. So you have to be, number one, disciplined, right? You have to complete the time period requirement. You have to complete the performance objectives, and you have to get the signature from the employer, and only then you can go on and claim. If there is a situation, I mean, I have noticed situations where employers have refused to sign time because the person did not complete the contract. The person left the training midway and decided to move on. In such a circumstance, the employer can not only refuse to sign the practical experience or the time, they can even claim a disciplinary action against the individual. It can have severe repercussions. So I would say stay clear of such situations, please. Ruchira, does that answer the question?
Very much. Thank you, Haroon. You really answered the question. Just on the same lines, for instance, if the organization is large, you mentioned we can always have two supervisors. Can this affiliate go to another supervisor without the first supervisor or that group not knowing? Can they appoint another supervisor outside and then get the claim signed? Because there was a question as such saying my supervisor is refusing to sign. Can I now appoint someone else completely outside whom I'm known to and get that person to sign?
In such a situation, it's very clear that, while you are working towards a particular performance objective, there has to be a supervisor supervising you or supervising your work. Not a situation where you have already completed that X number of years ago, and now you want an individual who was totally irrelevant, was totally not connected with you or looking at your work, and now you want a brand new individual to sign off a performance objective or sign off time claim which was 5 years ago. Of course, that's not true. That's not the right way of doing it. No, that cannot be done or should not be done. Okay. That's exactly why, thank you for bringing this point up, Ruchira. That's exactly why I said to you, things have to be planned in advance. If you have landed in an organization where there is no practical experience supervisor as a qualified accountant as a practical experience supervisor, then in the beginning, you must approach ACCA and ask for a remote practical experience supervisor who will look at the work that you're doing as you do it, and then in the end sign off. Okay. it is very, very difficult to substantiate the work that you did, let's say 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when this person was not the supervisor. Maybe that person who is now a qualified accountant and can sign off was not a qualified accountant 5 years ago, and therefore not eligible to sign off. It's as simple as that. Okay, so I'll once again repeat. Um, if you are in a situation where the employer is refusing to sign, this requires sitting down with the employer, clearing out what is causing a hurdle, and getting the signatures done and the sign off done. Right? You cannot bypass the process, go to another third person and get your experience signed off. I mean, this defeats the purpose and should not be done. Okay. Questions? Fund accountant considered a relevant role? Oh, yes, it can be considered a relevant role, but let me say that you need to look at the elements and you need to look at the particular performance objectives and then decide whether this is fully relevant or partially relevant. There are many questions about relevant roles. Financial analyst is a relevant role. Again, performance objectives. Please have a look at them. Tasneem Fakhri, and also look at the elements available and then decide. Okay.
Haroon, we
Yes.
also advise some of our young students when they are working in certain areas to speak to HR if they feel that they may not be in a proper area to get certain experiences, to speak to their HR and request, like if somebody is on maternity leave, whether they could go and work in that area and things like that. Do you think
Perfect.
that's a good idea?
Yes, definitely. Even if it is a situation where the practical experience supervisor is not signing off, you can, and if you think you haven't done anything wrong or the person was prejudiced, I would not want to be in a situation ideally. But if unfortunately you landed in such a situation, then you can go back to your HR also. And normally in good organizations there are forums available where you can voice your concerns. Okay, and then there can be a mediator who can resolve the issue for you. However, ideally speaking, you should stay clear of all such situations that may put a stumble block or a roadblock in your path to becoming an ACCA member. Okay, so
Sorry,
that's the
trying to
yes.
understand here, like if since a lot of students are having a concern, am I in a relevant role? If they
Yeah.
feel they are in too much of a smaller area, whether they could go to HR and request to be transferred to another area which covers their, to get that relevant experience, whether it is possible.
Yes, it is possible. I would say that speak with the line manager. That's number one. Speak with the with the in charge of the other department that you want to go to. Express your desire to spend time there as well. Do not leave an assignment midway. Complete your assignments. Show your desire. There are many ways of doing this, and I can tell you most of the organizations would welcome that. Unless there is a particular assignment which is very, very important and that cannot be shifted or switched to or given to another individual in the organization. In that case, the organization has the right to decide that no, not now, maybe sometime later. Yes, we have recorded your request, and if there is an opportunity, we will let you work in that department. But I mean, like I said, the final decision in this case will be taken by the organization, whether it is the line manager who decides or it is the HR department who decides. Right? That has to be a decision taken by the organization. Okay. But yes, this is doable and can be very and you can definitely consider that as an option. Okay. um, we will take more questions. I've marked this particular question and we'll try to answer each and every question as we go on, but let's go back to the slides. Let's talk about practical experience supervisors now. Okay, so what do these supervisors do? Now have a look at this. I mean, this will answer most of the questions that you were already asking as well. Identify performance objectives to target. Okay, now remember, it automatically everything falls into place. Identifying of performance objectives actually needs to be done before you start working towards. So if there is a supervisor available, you sit down and you plan it like this. Okay, even if you are doing this before starting your ACCA qualification, your supervisor at that time in that organization, should be able to recall and say, all right, yes, I remember the work you did at that time relates to this particular performance objective, this element, and therefore I consider that achieved. Number two, plan the experience, work tasks, and areas for development. Okay, that's very, very important. Number three, evaluate progress and offer feedback. Now, this can only happen if you decide, if you sit in front of your practical experience supervisor at specific intervals. You may want to have a monthly one-on-one meeting, a quarterly meeting, etc., and therefore continue to receive feedback, continue to be evaluated by your practical experience supervisor, and in the end get a sign off on your PER as well as your time claim. Okay, so this is the role of the supervisor, very, very important, and it should ideally be done as per a plan. The supervisor has to be a qualified accountant to sign off. Non-qualified line managers can sign off time, like I explained to you. Trainees can nominate an additional qualified supervisor to work with the line manager and help sign off objectives. So remember, objectives can only be signed off by a qualified supervisor, whereas time can be signed off by non-qualified line managers as well. Okay, and I'd already explained to you the situations in which the practical experience supervisor can be from the same organization but another department, from another organization but having a connection back with your organization as a consultant or as a supplier or as a client organization. Okay, so when you're defining a supervisor, this is the process. It should be fairly simple. You have to provide the first name, last name, email, and relationship. And while you are defining relationship, there is an there most of them are IFAC qualified, but there is one option for non-IFAC qualified line managers as well, right? But these individuals can only sign off your time and cannot sign off your performance objectives. Now the question comes about, there was a question asked about approved employers. So working for an ACCA approved employer definitely has benefits. Okay, so the time experience, the time required remains the same. The advantage of working with an approved employer is that you don't have to go back and explain each and every policy of ACCA to your employer. An ACCA staff member would have gone on to meet the organization, would have explained the entire PER process, etc., and then the organization would have agreed to all that and would have become an approved employer. So therefore that creates a lot of ease in completing the practical experience requirement. We've gone 7 minutes over time, but please don't worry, just 5 or 10 more minutes and then we'll revert to questions. All right, so in that particular case, if you still have to meet the performance objectives, you still have to complete the time requirement, right? However, the way to record the performance objectives or the elements is different. Okay, the form that you need to get signed off when you're working with an approved employer looks like this. So you don't have to go on to write down your 200 to 500 word statements, etc. However, the performance objectives, the structure of those performance objectives, the elements, etc., all remain in place. Okay, what we're saying really is that at an approved employer, the practical experience supervisor would have been explained the performance objectives and their elements and the way they are to be signed off and etc. So once you are done working at an approved employer, right, you can get this particular form signed off. The name of the form is performance objective summary, right, and you can get this signed off. Um, um, when you're making an application for your membership, right, you just have to mention that you've completed your training from an approved employer. The name of the employer will be asked as well, and be verified whether that organization was an approved employer at the time when you were working there. Okay, so remember that, please. Ethics and professional skills module, I think a very important constituent of the qualification. More details available on ACC's website. We don't have sufficient time left for discussing this in detail, but I let me tell you that this is a very important module. It continuously it is being developed and evolved. Okay, so um, previously it just used to be an ethics module, and now it is ethics and professional skills. So a lot of modern technology that you need to be aware of, etc., is now available through this EPSM, or ethics and professional skills module. Okay, so data analytics, etc., big data, all the challenges that the digital challenges the world faces. So a lot of elements have been added to this EPSM module, and I must say you must go on to complete it. Support available to you at this particular URL. Support available, again, there is a performance objectives guide available, right, where details about the elements, details about the performance objectives is available in quite some detail. So they're all available on ACC's website. ACC's competencies framework available. Again, if you really want to see yourself growing in your career, you need to be aware of the competencies that ACC has developed in you. You need to fully polish those competencies, then go on and work. And we can then, that is when you can claim the maximum benefit of the qualification. If you're looking for opportunities to work, opportunities to get training, etc., ACCA careers can come to your help. Um, in addition to job and training opportunities, there are a number of good articles that can help you develop yourself further. So I would say go and have a look at ACCA careers in quite some detail. I mean, if you have spare time, you should be spending that time having had a look at ACCA careers. So make good use of this particular platform. Um, these are our contact details, and in your respective countries also there are ACCA officers available who can answer any questions that you may have. Let's revert to some questions, and let's very quickly start answering questions. A question from Avinda saying process improvement in finance and accounts, BPM, handling, etc., running projects with specific F&A exposure. Would this be relevant role? Yes, relevant role. Like I told you, the best way to find out if you're in a relevant role is to have a look at the performance objective first, read the description, then straight away go on to the elements. See if all those elements that we are talking about to achieve a performance objective, if all of them are a part of your work that you are doing. Okay, so that will give you a fairly good idea of whether the work you're doing is fully relevant or not. Okay, next we have, if we have already completed a job in an organization, can we claim that period as well? Yes, Pavani, I said that experience gained at a particular organization in the past can be claimed as practical as ACC's PER. However, again, remember, has to be supervised by a qualified accountant, and you has to be in a relevant role. Kulisa is asking, sir, I cannot assign a supervisor to claim my time. This can be looked into. You can send us your particular complaints or issues, and then that can be addressed. Kavisha, can the presentation be emailed at the end? I will try and upload it, or since I have the email addresses available, we can place it at a particular link, and you can have a look at it. But definitely, yes, not a problem. We can find out a way of sending it to you. Um, Is a service letter enough to sign off my work, or is it compulsory to get uh, uh, a supervisor to sign off? Yes, signing off by a supervisor who's a professional accountant is mandatory. Um, Prapavan is saying, what if I left the job and recorded the PER? How can I assign to a professional supervisor? If you've already left the job and when you were working at an organization, the work was not being supervised, then you cannot get it signed off. Then, that work will probably not count. Okay. So if it is work in the past, it was not being supervised or it was not relevant, then it doesn't meet the requirement. If it was work in the past, it was relevant and it was supervised, then it can be considered relevant work for your ACCA qualification. Similarly, in the present, supervised and relevant, yes. In present, supervised not relevant, or relevant but not supervised, again will not apply. Okay, let's continue. Let's take a few more questions, and then I think Ruchira will be able to answer some more questions offline as well. Let's take two more questions. Uh, Advantages. Azam Ashraf is asking advantages of working at an approved employer. I've just explained that. Um, how long, how long should we, all right, within how much time should we be able to complete all the exams? Is there a time frame as to complete the exams? Ruchira, can you answer this question? My understanding, it is a 10 years, after which you either given an extension or you're not able to complete the exams.
Yes,
Yes.
you are absolutely correct. It's 10 years maximum, but it very happens very rarely that somebody would take so long. In Sri Lanka, most of the time students complete within, I mean, there have been 2.5 years also, students completing the entire qualification because they've had prior experience and become members, like you very correctly said, relevant supervised experience before. So they have been able to do that, but generally 3 to 4, by about 4 years, generally it's completed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. One question from Hashmitha saying, once we download the PER form hard copy, get it signed off and sent to ACCA, do we still have to add the supervising member sign and get it signed off? I think you're mixing two things up. If you are working at an approved employer, it is important for you to I mean, you don't have to complete the PER portal as we explained. You just have to get the final document signed from the approved employer. While making your membership application, a copy of that form should be available. You should be able to declare which organization were you working with and the experience, etc. If it is not an approved employer, then you have to go through the entire process of looking at the performance objectives, elements, claim the time, claim the elements, and then submit the performance objective, get it signed off, and then move on. Once you have completed all 9 performance objectives, gotten them signed off, claimed the time 36 months, you're ready for membership automatically. And in that case, your record remains available also with ACCA. Sorry, Shira, you were saying something.
Sorry. No, I just want to remind everybody on the call that they also can approach their employers to become approved employers. And that way also you can get this benefit of not having to do all these performance objectives. And actually it is kind of an easy way out if you are working for an approved employer. You only have to fill up a form, and if your supervisor is willing to sign all the objectives, it's all sorted. So go ahead and approach your employers also to
There are no free lunches in the world, Ruchira. They still have to work towards those performance objectives. It then
yes.
becomes the responsibility of the approved employer to get that work done, rather than ACCA trying to verify. So sorry, no free lunches in this world, my friends.
Haroon is not very much into approving this, but just between students and
No,
me,
definitely. I totally agree. There are definitely benefits for working at an approved employer. So get your employers approved, guys. Go and contact Ruchira, and she'll be able to help you get your employers approved.
And
But that
also, if
requires
trainee development, at least professional development. So because most of you are at affiliate stage where when you become a member, you need your CPD sorted. So that can be done only as an approved employer professional development. So if you need to become one of those, please contact me. You all have my email address, and then I can get back to you on that.
Okay, so everybody based out of Sri Lanka, Ruchira is the contact person. In case of Bangladesh, it is Shafat. In case of Middle East, it is Hamid. And in case of Pakistan, if there's anybody from Pakistan, it is our entire business development team, and which is led by Asad Hamid Khan. So these individuals in respective countries can help you with the approved employer process. I think if I can make, generally say we've answered most of the questions already, because these questions were sent to us when we were making the presentation. If there are specific questions that you would want to be asked later on, we'll be more than happy. Ruchira, will you be able to share contact details, or you can send us your emails again at the email address shown to you, students@accglobal.com. Send us your individual queries at this particular email address, and we will be able to assist you. Otherwise, you can contact our helplines. ACCA Connect is available to take your calls, or otherwise get in touch with the office. Sorry,
the recorded session of this webinar, can we share it with them?
Yes, the webinar recording will be available, automatically after a little while. You will receive an email. You will be able to go back and, go through this session once again if you like. And we will find out a way of conveniently passing on this presentation to all of you as well, for you to refer back to it. However, if you want to see these resources for yourself, please go to the ACCA website, where we have placed placed a lot of resources for your benefit. But we will definitely try to share this presentation with you. Okay. All right, Ruchira, if you don't want to, I mean, we already about 22 minutes or 20 minutes over the session. I would like to end the session here. Thank you very much for taking time out. Thank you very much for attending. I hope the session would have made quite a lot of things clear to you. It is not very difficult in the end. Remember, this is the effort that you put into completing your performance objectives. Your practical experience requirement is definitely worth a while, and it's definitely going to go a long way in making you a successful professional accountant. Okay, so please do take serious steps to completing the performance objective as prescribed. Okay, uh, uh, try to invest as much time into planning your practical experience requirement as possible, and try to sit down with your practical experience supervisors in advance and at the time when you are completing your practical experience requirement. I think with that, we bring the session comes to an end. Thank you very much for joining in. Thank you very much, Ruchira, for planning for this entire session. And we'll be happy to come back to you if there is need for another session. If there's need for repeating the session, the specific questions, we'll be more than happy to come back to you once again. Okay, thank you very much, and take good care of yourself. Stay safe, stay free of COVID, and look after your family, and stay healthy. Thank you very much. Take care of yourself.